Hi, I'm Drew Callow, and this is my presentation on Richard Henry Lee, founding father of the United States. He was born January 20th, 1732 at the Lee family plantation in Westmoreland County, Virginia. This is where he would spend most of his life. He was the fourth of 8 children born to Thomas Lee and Hannah Harrison Ludwell Lee. He had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. Several of his brothers were also active in politics. His brother Francis Lightfoot Lee is also a signer of the Declaration of Independence. In 1757, he married Anne Aylett. They had 2 daughters and 2 sons. When she passed away, he remarried Anne Gaskins Pinkard and had 3 daughters and 2 sons. His formal education, in the early years, he was homeschooled with a tutor until about the age of 16. He was sent to the Wakefield Academy in Yorkshire, England. The school still exists today. It's now known as the Queen Elizabeth Grammar School. He would finish his formal education there, no college. In the early 1750s, his parents passed away, and he and his brothers inherit the family plantation. So he returned home in 1753 to manage the plantation and explore other interests for a while. In 1757, he would begin his political career when he was appointed to Justice of the Peace for Westmoreland County. The Lee family was very well connected politically. His father, Thomas, served in the House of Burgesses and on the Governor's Council, so he followed in the family footsteps. Starting in 1758, he served in the House of Burgesses, which was the formal legislature before the Revolution. He then served as a delegate of Virginia in the First and Second Continental Congresses. In 1779, he was re-elected to the Virginia legislature, and between 1784 and 1788, he served multiple terms in Congress. After ratification of the Constitution, he became one of the first 2 senators of Virginia. He's a founding father for a couple reasons. His biggest contribution is easily Lee's resolution, which was the first motion made to declare independence from Great Britain, establish foreign relations, and develop plans for a confederacy. In addition to that, he was one of the first people to propose the Colonial Committees of Correspondence, which was the first effort to increase organization and communication between the colonies, particularly when it came to efforts against the British. It was these committees that ultimately developed into the First Continental Congress. In addition to that, he served as the 12th president of the Continental Congress, as well as the 2nd president pro tempore of the U.S. Senate. He was a signer. He heavily contributed to the Articles of Confederation. His resolution triggered the writing of the Declaration of Independence, which he did sign. However, he was opposed to the Constitution and did not sign it. He had many relationships with other founding fathers. He was very well connected. He became closely allied with John and Samuel Adams after the First Continental Congress. The 3 of them were often referred to as the Adams-Lee junto. It was Samuel Adams who seconded Lee's resolution for independence. Lee served in the Virginia House of Burgesses with Patrick Henry and his brother Francis Lightfoot Lee. Richard Henry Lee, Patrick Henry, and George Washington were among the delegates selected for the First Continental Congress. Lee was not necessarily close to George Mason, but they had many shared views and opinions. Lee would eventually propose his own version of a Bill of Rights for the Constitution, and it would be almost identical to Mason's Virginia Bill of Rights proposed years earlier. While Lee had become close to John Adams before the Constitution debates, the relationship did become strained because he was an anti-federalist and John Adams was a strong federalist, so that's why he's listed twice. His views often ran in opposition to other strong Federalist supporters such as Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. John Hancock at some point accused Lee of corruption while he was serving as a Virginia delegate, but I don't think there was ever any evidence of that being proof, so I'm just going to go with they don't like each other, so he's a rival. Aside from his resolution for independence, he didn't have any major written works published. He was rumored to be the author behind the Federal Farmer Letters, which were anti-federalist documents, criticized a strong central government. He was in the right place at the right time and the right mindset, so it makes sense that people would think he was responsible, but there's not really any proof. He was an anti-federalist. He was asked to serve as a delegate for the Constitutional Convention in 1787, but he refused. Once he realized it was a lost battle, he did propose several amendments in the Bill of Rights to be added to the Constitution. Again, he was suspected of authoring anti-federalist papers. Aside from this, most people considered him to be a moderate and clear-headed lawmaker. Lee supported a weak central government. During the tensions of revolution, he supported a boycott of British goods. He also supported George Washington's Potomac Company, which worked to make improvements on the Potomac River to improve trade. He also supported the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which created the first organized territory of the United States up near Canada. And this would serve as the precedent for future territorial expansion throughout the next century. He was heavily opposed to slavery. One of his first ever proposals as a member of the House of Burgesses was to impose a heavy tax on the slave trade to try to eradicate it in the state of Virginia. Pre-Revolution era, he was loudly opposed to the Stamp Act. He was also opposed to the abolition of debt owed by colonists to British merchants. So even though he was against the British, he still felt that people needed to pay their debts. In the post-Revolution era, he was opposed to the ratification of the Constitution. And that wraps up my presentation on Richard Henry Lee, founding father of the United States of America. Thank you and good night.